new, okay? I'll show you an old one. That was an old one, okay? But these are brand new, and usually what I do is I put 50% not honey, but sugar water, spray on these so they can lap it up and start making their cells. I'm going to put this down. We're going to have some fun. So, I like dressing up. Does anybody like to dress up? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. All right, cool. I'm glad. So, these items down here, my soaps, lotion bars, they're made with propolis, which is the glue to the hive, and honey and beeswax. I have a smoker there, and every beekeeper needs a smoker. Oh, he's gonna hold it for me. And every beekeeper needs a smoker. What the smoker does, it calms the bees, and it kind of hides your human smell. That's what the smoker does. Bees tend to lap up honey when they smell smoke, and then they get a little bit lazy. It's almost like a human eating a big turkey dinner with dressing. You know, you kind of get sleepy. We're having fun now, aren't we? But I love wearing this. So, this is called a medium super. I always use the medium supers. There's also something called a shallow super, which is smaller, but I always use the medium. And as you can see, there's 10 frames. I call it frames. Now this is the older ones. Look how funny these look. These are well worked on. And usually the queen bee can lay her eggs in here. It looks like a little piece of rice at first. The rice grows and grows, and then they cap it, and it develops into a pupa, or a baby bee. And then the baby bee bursts out, and then it cleans itself, and then it flies and tries to fly around and likes to work its wings. Now, this is the body. Right here. That's the body. And if you can see on the screen, that's what it usually looks like. So when we remove honeybees, we put them in an apiary. We reuse them. We don't destroy bees. Bees are very important to our environment. Every third food that we eat is from honeybees. We wouldn't have pizza. We wouldn't have our fruits or vegetables. We might have corn, because corn tends to pollinate itself. Here we go.
I'm the drone.
Yeah. Oh, so the males are called drones. The only, yeah. They are not worker bees. Usually the female bee is the worker bee. And she flaps her wings. She goes out 6 miles, comes back with food and pollen and nectar. And they're the worker bees. Now, they're drones. The only thing they do is
watch TV and football.
Actually, they mate with the queen. And in the wintertime, they're all excused out by the worker bees because they eat too much food in the wintertime. So they die.
He has been on a diet.
All right. So this is my shoe that has honeybee on it. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay. So this is the body right here. And oh, I don't have a queen bee excluder. Oh, I thought I had one, but that's okay. Queen bee excluders is a kind of a barred type, and the queen bee can cannot fit through it, okay? But I usually have one of these on the bottom so they can defend their hive. Everything loves honeybees, fire ants, there's diseases, mice, rats, you know, and so that's their defensive system right here. It's this little tiny hole. And this is the base board right here. And it's not too pretty, it's pretty old. So we've been doing this for many, many years. So I'm gonna put this back together. Okay. He's gonna put it back together. So you can buy beehives like this from Atwoods, from Davent, from Tractor Supply Company. You can also get your bee suits from the same people. And again, the parts of the beehive is the telescoping top cover, which is this right here. And then the inner cover, which is right below it, is used for feeding as a top entrance into controlled inhalation. The medium honey super, it is where the bees store the honey. Now each frame, once it's laden with honey, it is so beautiful, and you'll see right here in that picture, honey. And you'll also see in the pictures, I think I'm spinning honey, and I'm draining it and filtering it. It's a big job. It's very, very hard work. So anyway, is it going through? You did stop. Okay.
I'm afraid that it doesn't sound like one.
Oh, okay. He's gonna go through it for me. Is that okay? All right. So anyway, is there any questions? Yes.
Does it attract snakes?
I have never seen a snake in it. Never. That's a good question. I've seen scorpions. Okay. Fire ants, of course, and then there's something called a hive beetle, which comes from what is it? It's an Asian bug. A lot of bugs come from Europe, unfortunately. Any other questions? Yes.
How does it go from the yellow to the dark?
Good question. This is very old. There's little tiny bee prints. It's almost like you're going and trailing, hiking, and you're a human and you know where to go, where the trails are. And so it's kind of patted down. That's the same thing with the beehive here, okay? And you'll see some beautiful honey. Sorry about that. But here is some of the removals we've done. And that's me in Brazil. Sorry. Okay, so this was a fence here, okay? And we took the wood down and we found a huge beehive there. And this is at the Texas racetrack. There was a bee swarm and it swarmed into a trailer. The guy was surprised. He was so surprised. It was so funny. People were saying, "Atta girl, Christine, atta girl." Oh, yes, what's the question?
Well, several, but
Yeah.
we have to talk to each other. How do you harvest the honey? And how much do you get, like in a day? And is it like for one of those little?
Yes, it's for one of those little things. I usually don't get honey from the brood box. That's mostly for the queen bee to lay her eggs. But each one, I have a spinner. I have to cut the wax caps off using a hot knife. And you'll see that's in a roof of a garage. But each foundation is about 8 pounds. And so each year you can get up to 80 pounds of honey each year.
You do it daily?
I don't do it daily, once a year if that. Usually midsummer or mid-fall,
We harvest the honey
once a year. Because we want to keep the honeybees with their honey about 35 pounds each hive. We don't want to deplete them. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
What's the reason the bees would swarm? Is Is there?
Oh, thank you, yes. It's because it got too big. And so that's why you want to build the hive up with more boxes, so they won't swarm. But the swarming, they have to develop another queen. Each hive has one queen. And once the queen bee lays her eggs, it's the worker bees who notice that she's not laying as much, or she's not hard enough working as laying eggs. And so they develop maybe 12 eggs, if that. I've seen them too, and you might see a picture of a queen bee. That's me right there. I think I'm cutting comb. Yeah. But anyway, so they swarm off, and usually they swarm 2 or 3 times a year.
Is
Any
there
other?
danger behind them swarming? Like, I guess I'm concerned about like having children around.
You know what? They don't attack you. They all cluster together in a tight group. They have legs that are kind of like Velcro, and so they kind of hold on to each other, and they're more afraid of you than you're afraid of them. And even if you touch the hive or the swarm, they won't sting you. They only sting once, and once they leave the stinger in you, that pulls their whole stomach out, and they die. And so they don't want to sting you at all. And usually they bop you on the head before they want you to notice that, hey, I'm here, leave me alone. They don't go and sting you right away. They know that they will pull their stinger out and they'll die. Yeah,
Just going to be capping with the roller rather than the hot knife?
that's the hot knife right there.
So what is that, the roller that breaks the,
It breaks the wax caps off. But I use the roller in case I didn't do a good job. And so the roller tends to really make the honey drip out.
do you really need a hot knife if you have a roller?
You do need a hot knife, and they're kind of expensive.
You use the hot knife first.
Yeah, I use the hot knife first,
Oh,
and then I use the roller, just to make sure the honey drips off.
To get exposed.
Yeah, there's hundreds of little holes. I wish I had a picture of my spinner though. And then after I do all this, I make honey water for the bees.
Here's a spinner.
That's the spinner right there. Yeah, and so I can fit 10, I believe, 10 in there. And it spins it really, really, really fast. Now sometimes there's an empty one, but on the other side, it's full of honey. So there I am kind of stacking it up. I hope I can turn it on because it spins like in centrifugal force, and it spins the honey out. And it smells really good in there. It smells like honey, I'm serious. Yeah, so we have, there's like, at 10 o'clock there's snacks, but then there's also Andrea who has beautiful printed butterfly. She's an artist, and then there's Ernie and Betty, and there's a lot of vendors there. And they love their work, they love their craftsmanship. And then there's the Fort Worth City Water, and they give you, little water bottles and pencils and stuff. It's really fun in that room, and it smells good in that room too. Yes?
How many of those boxes do you keep?
Okay, so I had a bad year last year. It got droughty, okay? No flowers because of the drought, and that's how water is so important to everything, even the honeybees. So it's a valuable resource. And I even have water there for the honeybees, okay? And a honeybee needs, one hive needs a quart of water each day. And so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I have 6 hives. But then I work for ranchers, and that's draining the honey there. I work for ranchers, and I work to take honey out of their hives, and sometimes I stack it up this high, maybe 2 or 3 more boxes, so they won't swarm off. But yeah, water is very important, and so I have a pond in the back of my house, and they usually get water from that, but then I give them water right up front where they're at, so they don't have to spend time and energy going back and forth to the pond.
So when you go to the farm, are you taking your box to the farm? Or
I take their boxes and then I replace it with one of my own. Yeah. So I replenish. Yeah. That's why you see this as being so old and used. Yes.
what is the life of the queen bee?
Oh, 4 to 6 years. But the life of a female is just 6 weeks. Usually they fly, and their death is not being able to fly back to the hive. They work themselves to death, like we women do. We do. We work ourselves to death, don't we? Yes?
Queen lives 4 to 5 years, you have to obtain another one once you got it.
Oh, say that again, I'm sorry.
How do you obtain a new queen bee?
Oh, they make their own queen bees.
So once you've done,
I'm sorry, guys.
Yes.
if she's 4 to 5 years, is it automatically?
No. If she doesn't do the job right, the worker bees or the nurse bees, once she lays an egg, and the nurse bees and the rest of the hive thinks that she needs to be kicked out, they make eggs in the form of queen bees. Yeah. And the queen bee sac right here is about that big. It's pretty big. It's about that big. About the size of your digit, last digit of your pinky finger.
So there's one per hive, and they're laying all these queen bees, how do
They kick them out. Or the original queen bee stings through the egg sac. She usually doesn't sting anything. I mean, I've handled them to where they don't sting me, okay? Drone bees do not sting, but it's the worker bees that sting. But if the queen bee sees or senses the egg sac, then she pierces the egg sac and kills the embryo. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't that crazy how creation is? Any other questions? Was there one up here? Yeah.
But I was wondering, how far away from your house?
Oh, only 25 feet. Yeah. And you'll see in one of the pictures here, we have it covered. And we have our hats on, and I usually cover my bees and put a heater under it. I'm a mama, so I want my bees warm. Yeah, in the wintertime, you might see it. But that's my bee yard right there.
But like you have to keep the dogs away.
I don't have dogs, and I don't have a fence. I have cats, and the cats love the bees.
Yeah, but the dog will disturb it.
No, not really. They might sniff it, but they wouldn't do anything.
Movement around.
No, but if you're a rancher and if you have cattle or horses, that would be a danger. You would have to have a fence around it. Because cattle and horses tend to rub. They want their itched, and then they'll knock it off. Yes. Yes.
How much cubic space do you need?
Well, I tend to have at least 5 in the front, 5 in the back. And if I have more, then I have a different bee yard I bring it to. You don't want the bees to rob each other, because once a hive gets weak or the queen bee dies or there's no defensive system, then they rob that hive, leaving it empty. And so that's when it swarms off. It's kind of sad. Yes?
What species of bees do you have?
I have the Apis mellifera. There's many kinds. There's the Russian honeybees, there's the Hawaiian, there's Italian bees. There's more than 20 different kinds. It's almost like a dog. Am I doing that?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. It's almost like a dog, where you have different kinds of species of dogs. There's different species of Apis mellifera.
Is there one particular one that works better in our area?
Yes, it is. Usually, well, it depends. There's some, like the Africanized bees that we found from, well, that's a big story, but they came from Brazil. But those came from Africa to Brazil, from Brazil to America. I like them because they defend their hives, okay? I have to smoke a little bit more, and I have to use my pheromone on me, which is a spray they don't like, it smells like almonds. But I like their defense system. They keep the hive working and they control varmints, okay, like ants and stuff.
Do they produce the same amount?
Oh yeah, they produce the same amount, yeah. They're hardworking bees. But if you go online, there's different kinds of bees you can get, okay? There's one that produces honey far more better than the others. There's one that I don't know what species that is, but there's one that is disease-free, okay? It doesn't have the diseases. There's some that defend the hive more, okay? But you'll have to look online which one you like the best.
I have a question about.
Yes?
I was wanting to know if, like, in the picture where you showed the swarm in the trailer, did
Yes.
they call you to come relocate this swarm?
Yes, they did.
Is it something you usually do if somebody finds a swarm?
I do this as a business, so in that place, collecting a swarm is about 200, okay? And so I was about to do it for free because the man was kind of poorly. But if you saw in the distance, all of his neighbors collected the money for him. And they drank a beer. They drink a lot of beer over there at the racetrack. I'm serious. They were saying, girl, Christine, it was so cool. Yes?
What if someone has something knocked over the hive?
Oh, that's a sad thing. That happened to us once. There was high winds, 40 to 60 mile an hour winds. My beehive was really high, okay? And it was on like a platform, which was great. It was kind of low to the ground, but the wind knocked it over, and it was raining. And it was so sad. But what happened, I saw it go over, okay? I put my rain suit on, and we erected it up between Richie and I. We did it real quick, real fast. But you have to do it real quick, real fast. And we were hoping that the queen bee survived, and she did. So that's a good question.
Question back?
Yeah?
There is a lady on YouTube.
The mom.
Goes out and collects all these things.
Yes.
She never
Gets done.
pseudo, and she never gets done. Is there something in her body chemistry?
Probably. I would be so. Plus, she has her own bees, and she knows her bees know her. So that might be another thing too.
It only takes one time.
And it only takes one time being stung. Oh, and you'll see, did you have my eye up there?
No, I didn't.
Okay, honeybees like to sting the head first. When you're stung in the eye, you notice it. And you'll see on one of the pictures that my eye has been stung. Where is it at? And I tell you what, that made me pay attention. And so, whenever you feel confident and you have courage and you're thinking, I don't need a bee suit. I don't need a bee suit to put the cover off. All I'm going to do is open the cover and peek. And hundreds of bees will come out. Okay, so you only get stung once and you will put a bee suit on.
Is there something that you can put on the ground to prevent pests or insects?
I use diatomaceous earth, okay, and I have to do it weekly, okay, and a heavy dose of it. Also too, I have, what do I have under the bees? It's the, kind of like the tent. It's like, what do we cover with the bees? Tarp, yeah. So we have a tarp underneath the bees so the grass won't grow into the entryway.
You want to move the bees from somewhere else, where are you taking them?
To my house, yeah. If I don't have time to put them in a beehive, I let them fly away. And they will find a home near my house. And usually whenever they swarm, it's within 20 miles. Yeah.
And a question back?
Yes,
I noticed when you were, honey was coming out of the container, do you just do raw honey, or do you, raw or filtered honey or pasteurized?
I do not pasteurize. That'll kill the pollen. The pollen is very important to our bodies. Ever since I've been a beekeeper, 26 years, I've only had COVID once. And usually I do not have a cold, I don't have allergies, I have not had the flu. If I have the flu, it's only for the day, but not the next day. So honey and bee stings are good for you. Apitherapy, that's called apitherapy, is bee sting therapy. But I do have arthritis, and if somebody says, oh, you're never gonna have arthritis if you're a beekeeper, that's not true, because I have arthritis. Yes?
Do the different species of bees produce a different flavor of honey?
No, actually it's within 6 to 8 miles where your beehive is. That's the flowers, like sunflowers in the summertime. Bluebonnets, you'll see pictures of bluebonnets here too. That's their favorite food. Holly is their favorite food too. So and elm trees, that's the first flowering tree, and they're blooming right now. Okay, even in the wintertime they bloom, and that's their first bee. Dandelions are very important to them too.
And the harvesting of the honey, is it the same time every year for?
I try for the same time every year.
Like a beekeeper somewhere else.
Oh, theirs would be different. Yeah, and it's up to them what time they will do their bee robbing. So is that, oh, I'm over time. Wow.
You still have, 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes? Oh, okay. Any other questions? There was one already. Oh, yes.
What's the cost of like that?
Oh, wow. Go online, okay, and you can pick and choose. Usually it's under 400, but that's without the bees. But the 400 would also include the bee suit, and you need to have boots, okay, and then you need your gloves. And I usually get, where's my gloves? I usually get those blue gloves because if you get the leather ones, you get honey all over it and you can't wash it down. But with these here that you get from Home Depot, you can wash them down really, really easily. But don't buy leather gloves that go all the way up here, okay? And these are cheap. The leather gloves are very expensive. Yes?
When you open the top and you're looking at the bees, can you tell which is the queen?
Oh, the queen likes to hide. She loves the darkness. She's the dark queen. So usually, if I open it up, if she's on top, she'll go way down to the bottom and hide. And also, the guard bees will surround her and make sure that she's unharmed.
Is she bigger than the other bees?
She is. I have a picture of her. Oh, she's right here. She is right here. She's 1.5 times bigger. That's her huge abdomen right there. That's about 6 million eggs in her. She can mate up to 12 times with a different drone, okay? So maybe 12 to 18 times, and that's how she gets her fertilization. And she mates up in the air. And once the drone is taken away from her, he dies. Yeah, he dies. A terrible death. Yes?
So when you begin, are you buying your male bees and your queen separate, or?
I don't buy the bees. We get them from hives like this, so we reuse them. But if you want to have bees, takes in some knowledge, okay? I am still being educated. There's things I don't know. And these books right here are so important to me, yes. But if you work on a beehive, you will get bees from different states, whether it's from Connecticut, Florida, Texas.
You said you had a specific bee, and I wondered how you got that specific one, just from.
No, it's called Apis mellifera, which is any kind of bee that has honey. It's almost like my name's Christine, okay? So, yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
So, would the queen bee, would it always be eggs that she laid?
Yeah, it's only eggs. She doesn't do any other work. In fact, she doesn't eat by herself, okay? They feed her, and they water her, and they groom her, okay? So she's a very important bee. The queen bee is very important to the hive. Anybody? Oh, yes. I'm sorry?
Do you mix the different breeds?
That is, okay, like different breeds of bees, okay. It's almost like a cat. There's different breeds of cats. There's different breeds of dogs. I just get bees from people's houses. I get swarms, and I don't even know what kind of bee they are. I just put them in the hive. Well, okay, that's it. She's saying thumbs up. Hey, thank you so much for your patience. I really appreciate it. I'm really listening. I'm serious. And you're making my heart rate go down. Thank you so much.
Alright, did y'all enjoy that? Okay, awesome. So now we're gonna do our raffle for this class, so if I could get someone to bring me those. So everyone get your tickets out, so that if I call your number, you're ready to get your prize. I'm gonna mix it up. Anyone else?
Nobody told me.
Last call. All right. Last call. Okay. Okay, the winner is 1924277. 1924277. Amazing. Come right up here. Congratulations. You're welcome. All right, y'all can go ahead and get out of here or stay here if you're staying for the next class. You wanna go to both? Well, please feedback forms, we know that for our fall. You should have received when you walked in. Okay, let me see if I can drop it off.
That's whatever. No, it really was.
Okay, sounds good. I'll go up to the first one. Okay, I'll go see if I can find it for you. Okay. Yes, drip irrigation is here. Drip irrigation, and then composting will be in the orchid and iris grow.
Lucas, that's a good mother name.
Good job.
Okay, Lucas McCain. Does anybody call you Lucas McCain? No?
It's got holes in it. It's got holes in it, and it's, you have to put it together and put it different.
How's it going? I'm John. I'm from Oh, John Michael. Nice to meet you. Where are you? You set up on the podium there. Oh, that's cool.
It's not stuck. I don't know, but whatever I got you has the connectors. And I got, the one I got, it's got so many holes. Her foot.
I do have some feedback forms for people who didn't get any. Perfect. Keep those hands raised tall so I can see them. Anyone else need feedback forms? Testing.
Out of the way. Oh, she did wrong.
For those that just walked in, if you didn't receive a feedback form on your way in, I do have some. And if you weren't told in your last class, you do get a free ticket to Botanic Gardens if you turn in a feedback form at the end of the event today. So if you would like one, I do have some at the front and feel free to come grab one. We will get started in about 2 minutes. All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Are we having a good time at YardSmart so far? Awesome. Well, just a few reminders. Please grab an evaluation form if you have not. I do have some at the front. Like I said, you do get a free ticket to the TA Gardens if you turn one in at the end of the event. We also are going to do another raffle at the end of this class, so if you have not, please give your ticket to our lovely volunteer at the entrance. Again, there is no food or drinks allowed in this lecture hall. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker. This is John Kirk. He is a highly experienced professional in civil engineering and irrigation, and he is currently a senior design associate at Land Visions, which is a premier architecture firm in Tyler, Texas. His expertise is in irrigation and drainage systems, combined with strong analytical and problem-solving skills to help them tackle complex challenges. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to John Kirk.
Thank you very much. Well, we had to get up early today and drive from Tyler here, so weather was great. So I think that's a plus, and I'm glad to see that everybody's here this morning and interested in drip irrigation. So I just have a couple of questions before I get started. I just want to know, how many of you actually have drip irrigation currently in your landscapes?
Just regular irrigation?
Yes. Okay. How many are thinking about installing it in your landscapes? Awesome. So what this presentation is going to be about is, I'm just going to, because it's very short on time, I'm going to run through how I would normally either design or sell, more so on the design end, to somebody that's interested in drip irrigation, because I think you're going to find that if it's done correctly, you're going to love it. So, drip irrigation is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. And so just a little bit of history about it. I mean, it started back in, obviously, the Middle East, China, Egypt, areas that were developing at the time. They needed water. So, and they did that by doing clay pots soaked in the ground that would seep water out. That was kind of the earliest forms of drip irrigation. So, advanced into in Israel. So it was designed by Central Glass and his son, and he was actually the first one to design a emitter that would drip water in about 1959. So even back in, say, 59, 60, this is when it was really starting to come on the scenes. And so back then, they were primarily using this in agricultural application. It was, since later, it was morphed into more of the irrigation end of the industry. So as we fast forward to drip in modern day, you're going to see that there was a lot of measures that were brought up to speed, and with better materials and for longevity, most typical drip applications installed can last, 25, 30 years or longer, provided that they're maintained and functioning. So therefore, you should get a very good long use out of it. It's a very good material. So the list of materials, this is how I would start off from the beginning, because some people will jump in the middle of it and say, oh, you need this, you need that, you need that. Here's how you should do it. The first thing you should have is a plan and material list. You need to find out which are areas are going to be that you're going to use to drip. That will set up the stage for hydraulically sizing the areas correctly. And if you need assistance with that, you should always contact a licensed professional. A good licensed irrigator should be able to walk you through it without any problem at all. Next is you're going to need your PVC pipe. That's going to be sized correctly to subdue your your supply headers. Your supply headers is what's going to carry your water to the drip irrigation zone to ensure that enough flow gets to the drip tubing to make sure that they drip properly. The control valve, we call them drip kits. It's an all-in-one drip kit. It has a valve, it has a filter built into it, and a pressure regulator. That's very important because you don't want to hook a drip irrigation zone into a regular valve because the pressure in and pressure out is higher than what the drip irrigation needs because it runs on a low flow, longer time interval, and that's the benefit of the drip irrigation. So with that, you could have 100 pounds coming into the drip valve, but only allow 40 pounds of pressure to go out. And that's what's going to make even distribution of the water. Of course, the drip kit should be put in a valve box. Typically, with those sizes, it's a 14-inch by 19-inch box. The emitters are the part of the drip tubing that deliver the water. They just, drip out. Some are pressure compensated. But that's the most important part of the drip irrigation system. And then the tubing, obviously, that's what the drip emitters are connected to, just to run the drip tube out. And soil staplers, we like to try to staple it down about every 3 feet, or as needed if you have a crazy bend or a connection, you can staple it down and hold it down a lot better. The fittings are basically, they come in T's, couplings, 90s. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be the bar fittings that you will connect all of your drip tubing together to make the network of the drip system. Two of the most important things that I think that are overlooked are the auto flush valve and the air vacuum release valve. The auto flush valve is typically put at the lowest end, furthest away from where the valve is. So what that does is when that system kicks on, it allows enough system water to go through there, and it briefly kicks on and allows a flush to flush any particulate matter out of those lines to allow that system to drip like it should. If you have areas that, let's say, for some reason you have a high bed or an area that has a rise in it, an air vacuum relief valve at the highest point will allow air to escape out of that to allow that water to fill that line without any air in that tube at all. That's very important as well. So why drip irrigation? Well, I'm just going to read this because I think this is important. It's because it has the facts. I mean, you can see it, but I'll just emphasize it. So it minimizes the water waste, obviously, from evaporation and runoff. So you have a higher, better efficiency of watering in your beds. You could also use drip irrigation application in your lawn. That's a little bit more difficult, but since we're talking about surface irrigation, it's a lot more efficient than sprays, obviously. So, and then the other thing is that with sprinklers that only have about 65 or 70% efficiency rating on it, the drip is about 90% because there's no surface discharge. You're ready for wind. It's applied directly to where the roots are. And the other thing is that I believe Fort Worth has is that many cities and municipalities exempt drip as part of their watering restrictions because you have no surface discharge. I would say that if you had tree bubblers or micro sprays, that would probably fall under an exempt category as well. Anything that's not sprays or rotors would probably fall in that category. All right, so here's the big one. This is why I asked up front who has drip, who's thinking about drip. So there really is in the industry a love-hate relationship, and it's partly do because some people will pay to have it done, but it won't be installed correctly. So therefore, they feel frustrated because they feel that their investment is not keeping up with the watering schedule and the plant health of their landscapes. So the correct installation is of the utmost importance. Because a lot of people, they want to see their system running. So if they run a system check and they walk their yard, they want to see the pop-ups, they want to see it spraying in the beds. Versus not seeing anything at all, maybe they hear it hissing a little bit, but they don't see it, so they kind of, they're unsure, like, is this thing really working? So there is kind of that love-hate relationship, but again, the fit, form, and function of it is what's the utmost importance. I mean, if you have it sized correctly, you have the right valve in there, if you have the right supply header, if you have the right amount of drip irrigation in there, you should have, you maintain it. That's the other thing too, because remember I said they have a filter. You know, every once in a while you should go out there and you should look at that filter and make sure it's clean, wash it out, stick it back in, you should be good to go. The other thing too is that hydrozones and microclimates are very important as well, because you don't want to start mixing or wrapping zones around, and I'll get into that in a second. So basically this is part of that game plan. What I was alluding to was you don't want to tie a zone on the north side of your house and wrap it around to the west because of convenience. Because what happens is, obviously, the west-facing beds are going to require more water than, say, the north-facing or any other combination of north, south, east, or west. So that becomes a scheduling issue that you may have to overcome, because now you're going to run it longer to give water to the plants on the west because they're burning up, but the ones on the north are drowning because now you're flooding them. So it's best to have that good game plan of how you want to do it. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it may take 2 or 3 zones of this to do it properly. But that's what it's going to take to do it correctly. So this is another important thing. This is called the soil triangle. So you get started and you say, okay, I want to put a bed in here, but the dirt is the most important thing. So if you were not going to do any amendments at all, if you just said, hey, what is my dirt? A real simple way is just grabbing a handful of it, squeezing it really hard, and then opening it up. And then you're going to have to make an educated guess to say, okay, how much percentage of whatever I have in my hand will fit within this triangle? So, I mean, for instance, you may have where you think you've got 30% of that is sand. And then you look and you go, well, I think maybe 50% of it is just junk. Well, then you come up here to the 50% where it intersects, where you're down here in the silty loam. But if you say, well, I got a lot of clay, let's say it's 70% clay, and you start shooting off that chart, you're going to have more clay soils than you're going to have any other type of beneficial soil. So therefore, amending the soil may be the best approach to get everything down into a nice sandy loam, clay loam area where you have the ability to let that drip run down to the root zone where that's going to be the most benefit. So what are the soils? So they're a mixture of organic solids, air, water, and microorganisms. It's not just rock and dirt and stuff. It really has, definition to it. And all of this greatly impacts how the drip system is going to be able to get the water down where it needs to go. Soil texture is another big important feature. So texture is a classification instrument used in field laboratories and getting almost to the most important part right now. So when you're choosing your drip rates, your irrigation rates based on soil types, sandy soils require a higher rate with shorter irrigation intervals versus a clay type soil, which would need a slower rate at a shorter interval. Why? Obviously, because sand, if you look at if you look at a cross section of the irrigation of the drip, when that water is dripping, it creates what's called a wetting area. That wetting area, if you look on top, you see it is a round, circular, to some degree area where the water is dripping, and it's because of friction and tension is pulling through that soil. So you're seeing it on top, and what you also see is that as a profile, it would be a conical shape going down below it. It's dripping down further. So obviously a very high clay soil content, you'd have it on top, but then you'd only have a short profile. It's kind of irregular in shape versus a longer sand where it would just kind of funnel down. So that's why I'm saying it's very important if you had a very good clay loam, sandy loam, then you could pull that water down further into that active rooting zone. So the general, some general guidelines again. So if this is for like shrubs and ground cover, so your drip flow rate in clay would be, if you used about a 0.25 gallon an hour emitter, and in loam about a half a gallon an hour, and sand about 0.90. So you're almost talking about 1 gallon an hour. For the emitter spacing in clay would be about 18 inches. In loam, anywhere from 12 to 18 inches, and in sand, you want it 12 inches. The spacing, the soil texture. So the drip tubing calculations, there's a lot of factors that are involved in that, and you have to make sure that the drip tube does not exceed the manufacturer's recommendations. Meaning, we've either all seen or all heard war stories about somebody that will just take drip tube and they'll just snake it all over the place, or they just go and they wrap and they go and they wrap, or whatever.
That's how I do it.
That's how you do it. Well, I'm not saying anything better about it. I'm just, there are limitations. What you have to understand is that if you lay it out in a grid type system, then you kind of know exactly how much drip tubing you have. And it's very critical because as you make that drip length longer, then it's almost like a soaker hose effect, if you will. If you took a soaker hose and hooked it up to your water faucet, and say you're going to water your foundation, and you came out and you wrapped it around, you came back and you turned it on. Well, your highest flow is going to be right here at the source, and as it tries to move around, it gets weaker, 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 and weaker. And over here, it's saying, well, this thing's hardly doing anything. Same principle applies with that style, because now let's say that if you could run 1,000 feet on a zone, and you wrapped it here, and you wrapped it there, and next thing you know, you've got 1,200 feet. Well, the furthest end from the source is going to have a challenge. So that's why I say that's important to know how much drip you can put into your irrigation area. Man, I have all my calculations. How am I going to do this? Well, I know this much. If we don't get power, I've got business cards. At the end of the presentation, if you come get it, I'll email you my presentation. And you'll have it. I'll do that. If you have questions, you can call me, because some of this is French, if you will, but I can walk you through it. Basically, I'll just tell you this real quick. No, we won't, because I can't show it. Okay, we'll just skip that. based on what you were telling me. So if there's a calculation, so if you say, okay, if I had 1,000 feet of drip with 0.6 gallons an hour emitters on it, and the flow, they were flowing at 12-inch spacing, you can take that, what you do is you take your length, you take 1,000, you times it 0.60 because that's your emitter. You divide that by 1 because that 1's your 12-inch emitter spacing, and that would give you roughly 600 gallons an hour. So if you divide that by 60, it gives you about 10 gallons a minute. So I'm making that point because there's a direct, day and night comparison or difference between spraying your beds and dripping your beds. So if I have all of this drip, if I put 1,000 feet of drip and I got 10 gallons a minute, let's say I had an area and I had all of these spray heads in there, I could be pumping out, 30, 40 gallons a minute out of that thing. So if you're looking at water conservation, there's a couple benefits, right? So I don't have all the surface spray because some plants don't like to get their leaves wet. It's a higher volume of water coming out. It's a lot harder to control because all it takes is a nozzle or head to get up and whack and you're spraying the house, you're spraying the sidewalk, you're spraying your neighbors. Versus drip, it just drops right down to the ground. As long as you don't have a leak or a break and you maintain the filter, everything should run just like how you want it. And honestly, we've had our system in for almost 7 years. I haven't had one drip break in 7 years. And that was this year. I fixed it, and everything else, it looks great. So some real quick information. When you look at drip tubing, it's going to have different types of stamping on it or on the packaging. That's important because it's going to usually say the manufacturer model number. It's going to have the gallons per hour and the emitter spacing. So if it was like, let's say it was like XYZ-06-18, that would be that brand model of drip tubing at 0.6 gallons a minute, and it would be at 1 minute at 18-inch spacing. So if you know that you want, point whatever, and you want it at 12 inches, then that's the one that you need to look for your application. I have pictures of material. I'll be honest. I'll make sure that you all get this stuff. Let me see.
Hey, John, there's a question back here.
Yes.
John, how practical would it be to set up a small drip irrigation system for, say, a 32-foot household greenhouse?
32-foot in length or width?
In length.
How wide is it?
12.
Did you have pots or is it bent?
Pots right now.
That would be a different type of drip. What you would do is you would use what's called zero tubing. It's basically, so all drip irrigation is 17 millimeters, right? So a little half inch, a little bit whatever. So for your application, you have a zone valve. You would run through your filter and everything else, you would run your solid tubing. Off of that, you would get what would be a 1/4-inch supply line tubing. You punch that drip. You put that drip.
Institute. If jokes aside though, it is a lot of fun. If you cannot join us in person, those classes are now, we got really high tech this summer. I don't know what happened, but now we're streaming things live and you can tune in and ask questions, and it's very exciting. So anyway, we really do hope you guys come join us. The next class is in 2 weeks. I will be hosting. It is a new vendor called Texas Fungus, and Texas Fungus will be joining us and teach us all about how to propagate, grow, and set up mushroom growing, both for landscape, like some ornamental mushrooms, believe it or not, and also, of course, some edible high-end species too, if you're like me, just like eat all the time. Somehow, all of our classes end up with recipes. I don't know how clearly there's a thing there. So anyway, we hope that you guys join us for mushrooms. We'd really like to see you guys there. Like I said, it's a really fun evening. You can bring your friends. It's completely free. The tickets are available on Eventbrite. They're also available on Fort Worth Water's Facebook page. That's exciting. Okay, so without further ado, please let me introduce Miss Lauren Miller. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service here in Tarrant County. And through the application of science-based knowledge, Laura provides solutions to business professionals looking to save money in the horticulture industry, from eco-friendly professionals to those just planting fruits, veggies, and ornamental plants. She earned a bachelor's. Yeah,
That's just fake green industry professionals. I mean, it's great if they're eco-friendly, but I don't know where that came from.
I'm reading what I was told. Laura serves on the board of directors for the Region 5 of the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association, the Cross Timbers Urban Council, and the International
Urban Forestry Council.
I'm reading what I was given. This is Laura.
We're all doing the best we can with what we have today. So I want to start out by totally embarrassing him and introducing my new coworker, who happened to sit right here in a real convenient location. You should have in front of me. This is Jay Goodell. He is now our new home horticulture agent. So probably next year at YardSmart, you'll be hearing from Jay. I tried to tell him that he got on it today. I was like, oh, yeah. Anyway, so I'm here for you. All right, real quick. The way Hilda pitched this to me was to talk about raised beds and container gardening. So I want to hear, like, how many of y'all garden in raised beds? Just, oh, that's significant. Okay. And how many of y'all have some kind of a container? That should be just about everybody, because everybody probably has at least a house plant somewhere. So we're going to try to talk about both of those, but feel free to stop me and go, okay, what about this? You know, you're getting too much into this one or that one. I tried to put it together, but it was a little hard at times. So here we are. Well, why do we use both raised beds and containers? Why do we use that? To make a better environment for the plant. That's what we're trying to do, right? So we want to get it in the right amount of light, okay? And one great thing about something like a container, not so much a raised bed that you construct, though you get to decide where to put it, that raised bed. You can move a container around, right? So if I say, well, this poor plant needs, oh, my thing is leaking here. If I say this poor plant needs more light, I can move it over there closer to the window, right? Or I can move it outside. But if it needs less, I can put it in more shade. And that is a big benefit of both of these systems, is you can put things where you want them, and you can even move them, especially containers. That's a big benefit. All right, trying to get the water requirements right. One big thing we talk about in landscaping and in containers and raised beds is creating hydro zones. What does that mean? What's a hydro zone? It's where you put plants together that need about the same amount of water, so that you can water this one area the way those plants like it. And that's really valuable. Okay, the other thing is soil pH. Has anybody in this room tried to grow blueberries here in Tarrant County? Okay, how was that experience for you? You haven't been a pot, you're smart. What?
I got 2 berries.
2 berries? Okay. So, blueberries are an example of a plant that likes a low soil pH. They like an acidic soil. There's other good examples, azaleas, all kinds of things. Pine trees. They like a low pH soil in general. What's our pH in our soil in the ground? Pretty high. I've seen 8.9. I've seen, blueberry's not going to be happy in that, right? So when you're trying to grow something that needs a different soil pH other than what's available to you in the ground, an easy way to do it, or a really good way to do it, is to try to do it in a container, because then you can control that soil pH. Okay, most potting media is about what pH? About 5.5 to 6.5 in general, okay? So, and you can even get lower if you want. All right, cold protection. Why did I put cold protection on the list of good reasons to put things in a container? Exactly. In my kitchen right now, there is a Meyer lemon tree. Now, would that have lived through last week if I left it outside? Probably not, okay? So, but, I can bring it inside, I can take it out. So that's another reason, cold protection. Now, cold protection has a bad side though too. When a plant is in a container, it's actually more vulnerable to cold than if it were in the ground. Because those roots are up in the air. The soil is insulating, that'll protect the roots. Container, they're up there for cold weather, get out of. I may have lost, on my front porch, I had some lemon ball sedum in containers, looked really nice. I thought about bringing it in, then I was like, yeah, I think I looked it up and it said zone 4. Zone 4, that's really a cold place, that's like Nebraska or something. I was like, yeah, I can stay out there, they don't look very good right now. Probably because they were not in the ground, they were in containers, I may have killed them, right? Okay, all right. Now, the other reason, to put the plants where you want them. Sometimes we may have some space out in the ground somewhere, but it's hard to get at, okay? You may not have the ability to, how did I hear her say it? I was on a web meeting with City Councilwoman Gina Bibbins, and she said, I'm not getting down on my stomach anymore to garden, you know? And I was like, yeah, I get it. You can put things at a convenient, easy level for you to work on. And that's another big benefit of a raised bed or a container, because you can put it where it's easy. Also, like with kitchen garden things, right? It's really nice to have them right outside your door. You know, that may not be a good place to put them in the ground. I mean, I got a driveway right outside my door, but you'll see later I have a pot of basil out there. So you can put things in a real handy place for you to get to them, and that's nice. Okay, why would you maybe not want to grow things in the ground? Well, well, I don't think you're more likely to get grub worms in a container.
No, raise it in the ground.
But why would you want to not grow things in a container? Why would you want to put it in the ground instead?
Space.
Well, more likely it's that you have to make sure that that plant has everything it needs. You don't have a lot of margin of error. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. In a soil system, there are some nutrients, there's some water that you didn't put there. But in a container or a raised bed, you're going to be pretty much adding it all. So think about that. Then the other downside is cost, right? You've got to. Now you can. Yeah, the soil at least you're probably going to be purchasing. You can use a lot of things as containers. You probably have something you can use as a container. What's the main thing that a container has to have to make it work? Right. Okay. For example, this, no holes, but is my plant really just growing in there? No. Come on out of there. Well, here's what I'm going to do.
It is just growing in there.
No. See? Okay, it's got holes in it. I actually have a couple of lids of bottles and elevate that a little bit in there so that it will do what? Drain and not sit in water. You must have drainage in a container. You must have drainage in a bed too. That can be tricky in one particular situation. What's that situation? Clay or concrete is what I was thinking of. Sometimes people want to put a growing bed on a concrete surface. You have to manage your water more carefully. Because while you've got maybe enough space to drain in that container, you're going to have to watch out for when it rains or, you know, sometime you've got too much water in there, you're going to have to watch out a little bit. Okay. What can you grow in a container? Just about anything if you have space and you can take care of it. So what do you got to have? The right light, the right water, the right amount of air for the roots. Air for the roots. And also you have to have your plant nutrients. These are our macronutrients, the things the plant needs a lot of. And then also micronutrients, which can be just a really small amount. A lot of times in the soil system, we don't worry too much about micronutrients. Occasionally we have to, especially as they relate to pH. But they're often there in enough quantity that you don't have to worry about them too much. In a container system or in a raised bed, you may have to worry more about all kinds of nutrients. All right, creating the right environment. So, what's going on with these containers on the left? Why are those in containers? What do you think? They can move them in and out. Those are all kind of winter plants. That's a big old cardoon and some kale and some pansies. They're all like, they can handle some cold weather. What else? That's a spot. That's a spot there where there would not be anything growing. It's just a concrete spot, so they're pretty there. It's nice. Okay? Why is this aloe in this raised bed? Painted blue. Yeah, I think they wanted to combine it. Exactly, it spreads. Also, it does not need a lot of water. This is a great hydrozone for this thing. It's going to be able to drain, and you water that very little, right? So yeah, you're just creating the environment that the plant needs, and you're able to manipulate that in a certain way. So that's why we use that. When we talk about roots, roots are there. Their purpose is to hold the plant in place. That's pretty easy to understand. To take up water and nutrients, and we all have a concept that that's what they're doing. But the other thing that they do is a process called respiration, which means that they break down stored energy or stored carbohydrates into energy. And to do that, they need what? Well, they need the carbohydrates for sure. They're making those themselves out of the sunlight. They're really great about that. They need air. They need oxygen. They have to have oxygen for respiration. So you've got to have air down where the root system is. Now, obviously, some plants, you're like, but Laura, there's plants that grow in swamp. And there are, right? They're adapted to that environment that's wet all the time. But most plants, and most of the plants that we eat, pretty much all the plants we eat, are plants that grow in those kind of drainage situations where they've got air around their roots. Okay. Now, what are your solid components that are going to be in your container or in your bed? Your media and your roots. One of them gets smaller over time, and one of them gets bigger over time. The roots get bigger because they're always growing new roots, and eventually your poor plant can be like my little begonia here. Why does this thing come right out of its pot? Because it's root bound, right? It's got roots all the way out to the edge. That can happen even in a raised bed container where you're thinking, oh, I've got lots of space in here. It's big. You can fill it up with roots. That's a good thing, means your plant's growing, but you can end up with not enough space because you've got so many roots in that solid, taking up that solid space. Okay? The substrate, on the other hand, because most of them are made out of a lot of organic materials like peat or bark, they're slowly breaking down, so they get smaller and smaller over time. Those organic components of your substrate. Okay, commercial mixes. Why do we like to use commercial mixes in containers and in raised beds?
Because they're consistent.
They're consistent. They have the components in them that will provide you with water holding capacity and enough pore space. Right? They're going to provide you with that almost perfect situation for your roots. So they can have wetting agents. They can have wetting agents, right? What's a wetting agent? It's an additive that they put in there, kind of like soap. So it makes the water adhere less to itself so that it can wet the rest of the whatever's around it more effectively. Sometimes commercial media will have a wetting agent in it. Okay? The other thing it may have in there is some kind of moisture retention material. You think about baby diapers. They've got that fiber in there that can soak up a lot of moisture, right? And then actually slowly releases it, but you shouldn't leave the diaper on. Okay? They can soak up a whole lot of moisture. All right? And then the third thing that may be in your media, the third additive possibly, is fertilizer. So there may be controlled release fertilizer in your media. It's really important to read your fertilizer label, read your pesticide label, read your potting media label, read any label of anything you're using so that you know what you have, so that you know what you're dealing with. All right, these are some common components of potting media. They all kind of have different functions. The main thing would be the peat. In another thing that might be there instead of peat could be coconut fiber, coconut core, could be bark, it could be compost, another organic component. That's going to usually be the biggest component. These other components, the perlite, vermiculite, and sand, are not organic, right? They're inorganic components. They're basically kind of like minerals. Perlite and expanded shale are both, and calcined clay. They're all minerals that are heated so that they expand, and then they have more pores inside of them. And so what does that make them good at doing? Drainage, yeah, holding air, right? So they hold air in your media. Okay, vermiculite's kind of the opposite. It's sort of like that material in the diaper, right? It soaks up a lot of water, so it holds a lot of water. And sand does provide more porosity in a media. It's not the best way to do that, but it's the cheapest way. So it does. So if you're looking at media and it has a lot of sand, it's going to be heavy for one thing, whereas these other materials are light. It's going to be heavy, and you shouldn't be paying a whole heck of a lot for it if it has a whole lot of sand in there, because that's really the inexpensive option. Okay, you can use it, but that's what it is. Sanitation. Now, when you're controlling the environment, one cool thing you can control is weed seeds in that environment. You want to make sure, that's the other benefit of using that almost sterile potting material, is that it's not going to have a lot of weed seeds in it. Now, we talk about something called the weed seed bank, which basically means that in most soils there are enough weed seeds to, if no more weed seeds came along, you could probably still grow weeds for another 50 years. Seriously. There's a lot of weed seeds in the soil, in all soils. But in these sterile materials, there's not a lot of weed seeds in those sterile components. Okay. Now the peat moss, the bark, and the compost are not sterile. They're organic materials, but they don't have very many pathogens. Why don't they have very many pathogens? Well, peat, because it's low pH. Things don't grow well in that. Weeds, all kinds of fungi don't grow real well in that lower pH. And then the bark and compost, because what happens when you compost something? It has to heat up, okay, and that'll kill weed seeds, that'll kill a lot of problems. So that's why those are good components. Soil, on the other hand, which you can use if you have some. What are the downsides? You've got that weed seed bank. You may have some soil-borne pathogens, but you're also going to have those beneficial microbes that are in the soil. You don't really have those unless you use soil. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking about that, keep that in mind.
Do you recommend a certain soil that's sanitary that will give us like least amount of disease?
Like topsoil?
Whatever it is you said to.
I mean, potting media.
Yeah.
No, they're all pretty good. I mean, and it's like most things, you kind of get what you pay for. I mean, you buy in larger quantity, that's less expensive. If you're gonna fill a lot of beds, you want to get something in bulk, right? If you can. All right. So when should potting soil be put out to pasture? Most plants, like this little begonia here, if I were to take this home and put it in a larger container, which I should, which is one reason I brought it from the office, it will probably be happier, right? It's going to get some fresh media. That means it's going to have a whole fresh set of air space. It's going to have more water holding capacity. Its roots are going to be able to grow more because right now there's kind of nowhere for them to go. Most of the time that makes a plant really happy when you put it in fresh soil. So substrate years, kind of like dog years. 6 months is pretty old substrate. Yeah. You know, a year is really old, really, really old. So you need to think about that all the time. Now, when you're talking about a raised bed, are you able to, as easily as I can with a container, redo my substrate? No. And would I even recommend that? No. What are you going to want to add more of? Usually compost is the best thing. Now, on the other hand, if you need more drainage, you might want to add something like that expanded shale or calcined clay or perlite, something that's going to give you more drainage. But compost, usually your organic substrate is what's breaking down, so you want to add more compost and incorporate it. That's what you want to do. Okay. Water distribution in a container. All right, there's a gradient of moisture in a pot or in a raised bed. So where's most of the moisture going to go? Down, right? Because of gravity. It's just pulling it down. It's just pulling it down all the time. Less at the top, most at the bottom. Bottom can often be saturated while the top is dried out. That's why you don't, when you're checking soil moisture, where do you check? Kind of, yeah, not too far down. I mean, you don't want the very tip top because that's the very first thing to dry out, but kind of, you know, a few inches down is where you're going to check, either with your finger or with a soil moisture sensor. Just want to go a few inches down to check moisture. Okay, talking about drainage again here. A lot of people really believe in this on the right. Which one provides better drainage?
The one on the left.
You are so right. You are 100% correct. This one has better drainage. Why? Well, you think about it, it's kind of like this has a whole thing of consistency. So water drains really nicely through it. This has a whole different layer here. Water often kind of gets stuck there. Yeah. Which has more airspace. Yeah, the left. The left. So you don't want stratification in your container or in your bed. You want it to be all of one thing. You don't need to put rocks or broken pots or anything in the bottom of a container. It doesn't help you in any way. Well, I take that back. There's one way it helps you. People do this sometimes. They feel like styrofoam packing peanuts in the bottom of the container. It saves you money on substrate. But on the other hand, that means you don't have as much root space, you don't have as much water space. And ideally, that usually doesn't work that way. Yes?
Question. So if you have a pot that doesn't have holes in the bottom, can you do that? Or is it just as easy to put holes in the bottom of the pot?
That's a good question. All right, can I put holes in the bottom of this? No. I mean, very, very carefully, that's good.
Yes.
But I'm probably not going to. And actually, I like it because it doesn't have holes in the bottom of it. And that protects my desk, right? I'm getting too wet. So ideally, if you can easily put holes in the bottom of a container, like let's say you are going to use, and I'll show a picture of it later, an old metal tub that is already rusting out. Yeah, make some holes in there. That's great. You know, that's fine. If you can easily put holes in a container and you have a place for it to drain, it's outside, yes, do that. The other trick is doing what we did here, which is, what do we have here? Container inside a container, right? Plastic container inside my more attractive container with no hole. So.
And it's elevated.
Yeah, and it is elevated inside.
If it's sitting all the way down, it's not doing any good.
Well, if it's sitting all the way down, I have to be really careful how I water it, right? Because I can get too much water in the bottom.
Should you water? Because I see people, I've done it a couple times too, but it seems like the plant does better. You said it's in water sometimes. And the next time I water from the top, but the next time, so.
Yeah, soaking a plant in water to hydrate it, to water it is fine. What you've got to do is take it out of there. You can't leave it in there forever. But yeah, that's a good way to water. Yes.
Terracotta plants do have plants.
Pots.
Pots, do they help with drainage as well?
They do, because if you think about it, they're porous all over, right? So water actually does drain out of the sides of those. The other container that's like that is a fabric container. Have y'all seen those large fabric containers? They're very good for growing vegetables. Yeah, because water and air are moving in and out of the container all the time. So they're great, absolutely great. Okay. Container size and drainage. What's easier to water, a big container or a small container? Bigger, the easier it is. When you have a little bitty thing like that, has anybody tried to water, Jake, have you ever tried to water like a plug tray? Yeah, I know you have. What do you have to do though? You have to water really carefully and you have to manage it super carefully, right? Because you don't have a lot of, once again, you don't have a lot of margin for error. It's really easy to dry that thing completely out, it's really easy to get it too wet. So, if you look at this, this is showing, you can see that the solid percentage is the same throughout all of these. This is a container of substrate with no plant roots in it, okay? It's 13% solids in every single container because that's what the substrate is. But when you put water in it, you can see that the smaller the container, the larger the percentage of water. Just because there's no place for that to go. So water fills up pores that would otherwise hold air in a smaller container. In a larger container, you've got more air. Now, if I were to ask you what would be perfect, what would be perfect? Pore space relationship. About half air and half water would be perfect. Okay?
I got a question.
Yes.
Why is it that some plants you water on the edge instead of the top of the plant? What's the reason for that?
Well, in all plants, where you really want to put the water is where the roots are, right? So you think about it, can the water get to the roots? Some plants, just the way the plant is, if you put the water up on top, it's mostly going to stay up on the leaves of the plant, especially plants that have a whorl, where they'll kind of hold water. So you really want water to get to the roots. The better job you can do of getting that water at the roots, the better you are at watering. Is it easier to put the water down under the leaves of the plant? No, probably not. Well, it's easier with drip irrigation, but like when you're hand watering and stuff, it's harder.
Well, I was told by some nursery that some plants you shouldn't water from the top.
Some plants are more sensitive. Some plants, if you leave them with wet leaves, well, let's just talk about something that everybody knows a little bit about, because most people know about irrigating your lawn, right? I mean, everybody will tell you, if you water your lawn in the evening, and then the sun goes down, then it stays with wetness on the leaves all night long, and what happens? You'll get some kind of disease development, right? You'll get some kind of fungal disease usually because that wetness is there and those fungal spores have to have water to. So some plants are sensitive in that way. They're more likely to get a disease. That's one reason, okay? That if they have water on their leaves, they're going to get a disease. For all plants, they don't need water on their leaves. They need it down around their roots. Other plants just don't like it. Like African violets are a real well-known example. You put cold water on their leaves, you're going to get a leaf spot just because it's like, ooh, I'm allergic to cold water. I don't like it. I'm going to react, right? So that's just the way they are. Now some plants, it doesn't bother them, but some plants really don't like getting water on their leaves. But for all of them, it does help prevent disease development if you get the water down on the roots, not on the leaves. All right, watering containers. So, as the amount of substrate available for root growth decreases, because the plant's growing, you've got to decrease the water volume, and you've got to increase your watering frequency. That's where we are with this little plant, right? There's no room for the roots. When I water this plant, it does not take very much water for me to reach field capacity for this container. So if I want to water this plant, watch, I can put just a little bit of water in here, and it's going to start coming out. See? That's field capacity. It cannot hold any more water. Cannot hold any more water. There's no point to water any more than that. That's all it can do. So how often do I have to water this plant? Pretty darn frequently. That's why it's on my desk. It was on the shelf, and I looked over it one day, and it was 10-minute warning, Kelsey. I'm sorry, I haven't gotten very far. And it was wilty, so I had to move it over where I could see it, so I would remember to water it all the time. So this is not the way to water your landscape. Why? It's the ground. The ground is enormous. There's room for roots all. Yeah, this is not what happens in the ground. This happens in a container. All right. Let me quit talking about water flow, talking about some other things. All right. This is square foot gardening, kind of a well-known little chart about the amount of space that you need for different kinds of vegetables. When you're putting them in a container or you're putting them in a bed, you've got to think about this a lot. This is a ruler. This is 12 inches. Let's say I want to plant tomatoes in this container, which already does have holes in the bottom, as you can tell, because water's coming out on the table, right? So how many tomatoes can I put in this container? Anybody want to guess? Oh, I saw that already. Yeah, one, because it's 12 inches and it's not another 12, right? If this were a little bit bigger, I could maybe put 2 in there. But basically, 1 tomato would go in this container. Can I put a watermelon in here? No, I can't put a watermelon in here. I mean, I could. It wouldn't be. Yeah, I would not have enough space. I'd be, messed up before I started, right? So you can do anything, but will it be successful? No. Okay. So you think about that when you're planning for the amount of space that you need. Yeah, everybody does. Yeah, you're like, well, they're little, But you got to think about your mature size of something. Okay, can I plant, let's say I want to plant a Japanese maple in here. Can I do it? Temporarily. Yeah, I could do that for a little while. I could make it into a bonsai. What do they do with a bonsai? They cut the roots. They purposely, make it. Yeah, exactly. I could do a bonsai. That would be beautiful, right? Bonsai. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, you've got to have enough space. You got to think about that. Let's see. Whoops. Oh, this is the wrong presentation. I'm sorry. Just a second. Because there's some stuff I wanted to show you. I'll work tomorrow on the Spanish. Essential points here. Okay, here we go. Push. Okay, this is a main point that I want to tell you. Look at your space first, but then plant what you like. Right? This is the #1 take home I want to give you all. How many minutes do I have, Kelsey? Where are you?
I'm here. Probably like 5.5.
5.5? Okay. All right. Plant things that you like. He famously said, I don't like broccoli. I haven't liked it since I was a little kid. My mom made me eat it. Now I'm president. I'm not eating broccoli anymore. Caused a lot of grief, right? Because the broccoli growers all got very upset about that statement. But it's okay, as they should. He probably shouldn't have said that. But if he's growing a vegetable garden, does he need broccoli in there? No, he doesn't like it. Grow something you want. Why? Because you will take better care of it, first of all. Okay, so ease of growing vegetables. Easy to hard. Tomatoes are not easy. Now, people love them. They are delicious. They are worth it when you grow them. But they are not easy. ease of growing is a lot of our, see, the blue is cool and the red is warm season. A lot of our cool season vegetables are actually easier to grow. I know we're going into the warm season vegetables now, but a lot of our cool season vegetables are easier to grow. So do that fall garden. Do it. Okay. Colorful vegetables. Herbs. Why do I think everybody should grow herbs? Because, well, basically they're expensive when you buy them and you don't need too much, right? So you can, everybody, if you're going to grow one thing, make it an herb that you like and use, because it will be worth it to you. All right?
I have a mint that always just grows so crazy at the beginning and starts getting flowers and everything, and then you trim it back, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the part that fell off and keeps growing, will it grow small again to the seed again, or what? You just kill it all the way back for that?
Well, so what's happening with mint or basil or anything when it flowers? If you think about it, a plant's life cycle, it grows vegetatively, right? And then it flowers, it sets fruit or seed, and then it eventually dies. Some plants live for years, some plants live for 1 year. When you're trying to eat the vegetative growth, what do you want it to not do? Flower. So if you take those flowers off all the time, you will have more vegetative growth and you'll get what you want. Okay? Okay. Now sometimes you want it to flower. You want it to go ahead. None of these herbs do you really want to flower. Well, okay, I take that back. I think rosemary should be allowed to flower because it flowers when? In the winter. Yeah. And that's really a great resource for bees and other, pollinators. I mean, it's one of the few things that's flowering at the time of year that it flowers. So I would say you should let your rosemary flower. But most of your herbs, unless you just love the way the flowers look, or you want to, if you want to support pollinators, that's also great. But most of the time, if you're really trying to eat a lot of them, you just keep those flowers off. All right, this is my basil on my driveway here by my back door. All right. So what do you think? How much is that worth at the store? More than $20?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I can get a lot of basil out of that little tub there on my driveway. So, and it's also a place that I couldn't grow anything else, right? There's concrete there.
Yeah.
But it's also super handy. So if I want some basil, it's there for me. So this is an ideal herb garden, truthfully. It really is. All right. Yeah, I don't keep them off very well. Okay, hydrozones. Water needs, partially translated to Spanish. So the thing that it says is don't mix plants with different water needs in the same container or same raised bed. You want to try to water things all the same in one place. So at least you want them to be close to each other. Basically, okra is super drought tolerant, right? You want to grow something you don't have to water a lot, okra. Southern peas, you saw this at school, things like that, super drought tolerant. Down at the bottom, tomatoes, once again, one of the reasons they're hard is you've got to manage their water really carefully. What happens to a tomato if you water it too much and then not enough? It splits. The fruit splits, exactly. So you really got to manage water carefully on a tomato. All right, let's see. Oh yeah, this picture I took last night. I went home, I took a walk. That's Thomas Place Community Center, not too far from here. These are the raised beds at Thomas Place. And I wanted to show you this because I see way too much of this. This was okra. It was perfectly nice okra for quite some time. But when did that stuff freeze? Last fall, right? So what do you do when something has, now this is not too bad. There's a few little weeds in there, but not a whole lot. But when you have nothing growing in soil of any kind, bare ground is a devil's playground. What happens? Something will grow there. Something will grow there. Will it be something you want? Probably not. Probably not. I'm done. I am done. Okay. All right. Fine. So what I'm saying here is, in these raised beds in the winter, either grow some of those things that live through the winter, like rosemary, lavender, garlic chives, all those kinds of things that you can grow. Thyme. You can grow through the winter. And if you look at these other beds, that's actually what they've got in here. They've got lavender, they've got sage, they've got thyme down here. This is a rosemary plant that you can't see very well. That's great. The other thing you can do is grow some of those winter annuals. They're great plants. Or you can put that bed to sleep. How do you put that bed to sleep? How do you put a raised bed to sleep?
Cover it.
You cover it. What do you cover it with? You can put cardboard on there, but mulch. Lots and lots and lots of mulch. Lots and lots and lots of mulch. And then it'll be ready in the spring. Get ready to go. Yeah.
So this year we had tomato plants in containers.
Buckets. Yeah.
And then we put them inside the garage and it froze. But there were lots of days of freezing.
Yes.
So could we have kept them outside and covered them in some way, or was it better?
Probably they are too cold sensitive. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you only have to move them in the garage for like a day, and back out, then you can maybe do it. But if they have to stay in here, they lead a lot of life, and they can't live inside there. Okay. Thank you.
So what Laura is not telling you is that she's actually going to go present to our Spanish track right now. We're going to run her across the parking lot over to the break.
The parking lot? That was bad running on your part.
We've got the interns at the ready to help you carry. They are all there. So if you guys could please give Laura one more round of applause. Mr. Angel and his mushrooms are here, so we are going to go ahead and flip this room if you guys want. But really quickly, we are going to go ahead and pull the drawing. And this will be for one of our very high-end kneelers/gardens.
Oh, you like that?
Oh, you're one of my classes on Thursday. Wow, that's good stuff. You don't even know it. Not looking. Okay, you have 192 4176. 4176. For free, come back. 6 to 8 p.m. The next one is March 13th. QR code in the very back of the room where you can get signed up to get notifications when our classes are. No, you're fine. I'm right here.
Several years ago.
Mycologists are people who study fungi. At the end of 2020, wanted to see deep in his study of fungi and plants. This state allowed him to see nature from a new perspective and reignited his love for science. Don't we all love it? His passion for science and nature led him to discover the medicinal value of plants and fungi. This interest has sparked a deep curiosity to him to explore the medicinal world of these fascinating organisms. So, without further ado, please welcome our friend Angel.
Thank you for having me again. Last year, this talk presentation was more on medicinal mushrooms. This year, I'm switching it up because there's a lot of mushroom talk around this time of year. Now that it's getting a lot more popular, so I'm going to be focusing on home cultivation for those that actually want to get started with mushroom cultivation at home. This will kind of give you a slow step-by-step guideline of what you might need, what you might look for, what you're looking for whenever it comes to cultivation. It's a pretty lengthy presentation, so I'm going to try to move at a pretty good pace. If you have any questions, raise your hands. We also, if you want to scan this QR code, this actually will take you to a link of this PDF presentation. That way you have that if you want to save it, keep it at home, use it for friction use. And I'll also put this up at the end too in case you want to scan that later on. And then I'll put it back up again after the presentation just in case you didn't get it. So, moving forward. So when we're trying to grow mushrooms at home, what we're really trying to do is replicate nature, right? So up here I have a little design or a little just example of the mushroom life cycle, right? So as a mushroom, we start with spores. Spores germinate. They're tiny microscopic seeds. They're really not considered seeds, they're just spores, but seeds is a good representation to kind of give you a good idea what they are. But they're so microscopic. I mean, they're incredibly tiny. They look like dust particles. And most mushrooms release quite a bit of spores. Oysters being one that is a big spore producer. But when they produce spores, they start creating hyphae, which is these, once they germinate, they create this thing called hyphae, which is these thread-like things. Once two of those hyphae meet and connect, you start getting mycelium. Mycelium is a white mass. It looks like little webs, little just threads that just spread along the ground floor. You'll never see them. They're usually beneath the ground. You might see them on a decaying log somewhere, but for the most part, they'll be underground. The only time you ever see the mushroom is usually when it pops up after it rains, but that's just the fruit, right? The actual living organism is within the ground, completely maneuvering, decomposing all matter within our world, right? So after they create the mycelium, they start consuming their substrate. So substrate is their food essentially, right? So in nature, most gourmet mushrooms that we're gonna try to cultivate are wood lovers. So they like hardwoods for the most part. Oak is preferably what we use for cultivation, just because most mushrooms grow on oak. You can try other hardwoods. I've had plenty of success with that. But once they consume their substrate and they've consumed it all, they don't have anything left of it, they're ready to reproduce. Their life cycle is coming to an end, so they want to produce fruit to then release spore again. So they start creating primordia, which is the initial fruit. It's these small little bumps. After that, the development starts into actually fruit bodies, which then become mature fruit bodies, which release spores again and start that cycle over again, correct? Cool. I'm just going through spores. Colonization, as you can see here again. Here's mycelium just colonizing through grain, consuming it slowly by slowly. So here in a little bit, we'll talk more about grain and why it's used. So going back to fruiting, this is what primordia looks like. These small little bumps. And as they get older and mature, they start creating fruit bodies. Let's see if I can actually. And this is what sporulation looks like. They just kind of travel through air, wherever they land. Eventually, hopefully, some will germinate, creating that hyphae, eventually creating mycelium, and continuing that life cycle. Sometimes bugs will walk by them, carry them. They get transported in so many different ways. So here, we're trying to replicate that same thing, but indoors, correct? So there's a few different methods that you can do this with, but here's some key factors that you need whenever you're growing mushrooms. you need humidity, you need temperature, you need light, you need airflow. Humidity, you want that between 85 and 95%. So mushrooms love coming out when it's super humid out after rains. They love that humidity. They need that moisture to kind of continue growing, right? Temperatures, they like it within that 75 to 65 range. Some like it a little bit below that. A lot of them don't like it once it gets a little too much warmer than that. It starts drying out. It's really not a pleasant time for them to be fruiting. So 75 and below works great. Stuff like enoki like to fruit at like 60 to 55 degrees. So there's always variance depending on variety that you're trying to grow. As far as methods, there's a few different methods. There are grow bags, like the one you see up here. This one's just fruiting through the filter because I let it go a little bit too long. But you can use grow bags like these. You can use Martha tents, which are just small tents that you can get off Amazon, like 2-3 tier Martha tents. Or you can go as big as a scale as a big grow tent that you get. They're used more for like plants, but you can modify it to grow mushrooms as well. Today I'll be focusing more on bags, just because seems to be like the easiest way to grow them at home. That's if you don't want to use straw, but we can get that into a little bit later. So your basic supplies for cultivation are your genetics, your grain, your bags, so your containers, your substrate, your pressure cooker, which is a very important part in this, still air boxes or eco-flow hoods, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit, gloves, masks, because you want to keep things sanitary and clean, isopropyl alcohol for cleaning your utensils during the processes, and then paper towels, because you'll need to be wiping things over and over. I don't recommend rags, since usually you want to keep things clean. You don't want to use a rag that you just wipe something dirty with to reuse and wipe that down again. So when you first start, you're going to choose a genetic. So what genetic do I want to use, right? If you're a beginner grower, I usually recommend oyster mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms are a great beginner one. When you are looking into oyster mushrooms, understand that some varieties like certain temperatures more than others. So your blue oysters will like a little bit more of a cold temperature, so they like anywhere between 75 to 60, maybe even 55. Pink oysters like it a little bit hotter. They can fruit in 80 to even 90 degree weather. So depending on the time of year, think about that as well. Lion's mane, like the one you see up here, is a great beginner one too. This one hasn't been really touched, and it just kind of fruited out that filter patch. I haven't touched it. It's just been growing like that ever since. So these are really easy to grow. Once you make your incision in the bag, really you just need to spray it a few times a day, maybe 2-3 times, and that should be more than enough moisture to keep it growing until you feel like it's ready enough to pull.
You spray the outside or you spray inside?
You spray the outside. So usually you would make, if you got a bag like this, it was ready to fruit, because you could get bags like this ready to fruit if you didn't want to start from the beginning. Places like North Spore, Southwest Mushrooms, you can get grow bags like this for like 40 bucks. And when you get one, you'll clean the surface of it wherever you want to make your incision. And then you'll make an incision with a knife, a clean knife, scissors, about 3, 4, 6 inches across. And then with distilled water, you'll spray it a couple times a day. Just whenever you pass by, put it next to a window, and just whenever you pass by, just spray it a little bit, a couple times, and then leave it alone. Within a week or two, you'll start seeing that primordia start forming. And then after that, you start seeing that fruit body just start popping out. And then once you start, like lion's mane, they have teeth, they don't have gills. So once these teeth get really long, you kind of want to harvest it. That's kind of showing a lot of maturity at that point. You can catch them when they're a little younger and they're a little more tender. So at that point, you just harvest whenever you like. And then you can keep spraying and it'll continue to fruit up until you come into contamination, which we'll talk about a little bit here. Cool. So whenever you're starting to grow mushrooms, you need a base. For those who have ever made bread and made sourdough bread, this is essentially like your starter. This is where you're going to start your fungus. So usually you would use some type of grain, whether it be millet, rye, wheat, oat, birdseed, just some kind of grain that will be hydrated and sterilized. Here I have millet. There's a couple different methods of hydrating grain, but you can either let it soak overnight, You can boil it for 30, 45 minutes, or you can do a no soak, no simmer, where you just put a certain amount of grain, a certain amount of water, and then you put it into a pressure cooker. So whenever you're choosing the type of grain, just think about what's local to you, what's cheap, what's gonna be in your, what are you willing to spend on grain? You know, I can get a 50-pound bag of oat at Tractor Supply for like $25, $30, or I can get a bag of millet for like $50. So, you know, if the oat's gonna fit me better for my price range, then I'll just go with the oat. But any kind of grain works well. If you don't want to go through the process of having to sterilize and do the whole thing, you can just use Uncle Ben's Ready Rice. This is already hydrated, this is already sterile. Brown rice works the best, and essentially you wipe this down with alcohol. You get your spore or your syringe that you usually would get online somewhere. I got these from Mycelium emporium, or no, this one's from Southwest Mushrooms. So usually you would get a syringe with about 10 cc's or 10 milliliters of liquid culture or spores. You would wipe your bag down. You would kind of pinch the bag up a little bit, and then just stick your needle in, put a little squirt in there, tape it back up with microfiber, or just tape it back up with a little micropore tape, and then just let it sit for about 2-3 weeks. Slowly check at the bottom, and you'll start seeing the colonization happen. And once you feel it's very dense and hard, you know that it's ready to use. And then you can put that into your bulk substrate, which we'll talk a little bit more about bulk substrates here in a second. But this is a great option if you just want to start, don't want to spend a lot of money on jars, lids, the whole process. This is a great, easy one to start with. Okay. Choosing a container. So this again is going to be a preference thing. You know, what's your budget look like? What do you have around the house? Can you use if you're just trying this out? For containers for grain, for cooking grain, you can use things like jars. Obviously, like the one that I just showed. You can also use bags. These are mushroom bags. You can get them at Amazon. I get mine on mushroommedia.com. These work great. If you're doing large amount of grain, bags work best. If you're just doing stuff at home, just want to do 1 or 2 bags, honestly, jars work well, or the Uncle Ben's Ready Rice. If you're trying to fruit, so once we get into fruiting, you can fruit in bags. You can use what they call a monotub, which is essentially a clear container, a bin, that you drill some holes on the sides to create airflow, and you can grow things in there. Things like oysters and lion's mane don't work as well. You just have to upscale it a little bit and put a fan and a humidity reader in there and kind of just upscale it a little bit. But there are certain type of mushrooms that work well in just monotubs. Glass jars. If you wanted to, you could just put a little bit of substrate in one of these jars, mix it with your grain, and let a mushroom just grow in here. A lot of cultivators do that when they're trying to grow a lot of mushrooms and they're trying to select for certain features in a mushroom. Instead of growing big batches, they'll just grow in small jars. That way they can just go and select what they need and make the job a lot quicker. Cool. Again, just think about cost, quantity, needs, availability, what's around. All right, so substrate. Substrate is their food. So we're gonna stick for wood lovers. I kind of just gave you guys the numbers here for what 10-pound blocks and 5-pound blocks are. But essentially, we're going to be focusing on master's mix for our bulk substrate. So this is going to be essentially replicating a log in the woods, right? Just a dense piece of log. So what they love to eat is hardwood, right? So we give them half hardwood and half soy hull. Soy hull is just a byproduct of the soy industry, and apparently mushrooms love it a lot. They have a little bit more nutrients to it, and it just kind of helps with the yields. So it's a half of oak, half soy hull, and then a 60% hydration. So for a 10-pound bag, it is 2 pounds of oak pellets, 2 pounds of soy, which would be your 40%, and then your 6 pounds of water, which would be your 60% water. You just put it all together in a bag, let it hydrate for like 15-20 minutes, seal it over, and then you'll put it into a pressure cooker. This pressure cooker will sterilize everything that you do. So there's certain things that you want to pasteurize, certain things that you want to sterilize. These bags are something you want to sterilize. And you'll sterilize these at a 15 PSI for about 2 hours. And I'll talk a little bit more about this here in a little bit. Pasteurization. I'll talk about this one pretty quick. So pasteurization is the process of heating something to about 140 to 160 degrees. You're trying to kill most bacteria and microbes in there, but you're leaving some beneficial. So that's really helpful when you're dealing with like dung or things like straw. If you are doing stuff with dung and you sterilize it, it will immediately contaminate every time. Just because there's so much bacteria in it, it needs some beneficial bacteria to help the mycelium catch and take over before other bacteria come in. So in this would actually be a really easy one for a lot of you. If you have access to straw, which is fairly cheap as well, you can go through a process of it's called cold pasteurization. So there's two types, there's cold and hot. Hot is just heating it to 140 to 160 and leaving it there for about an hour. Cold seems to be a lot easier and a lot more user-friendly. You essentially just get straw. You can use hay as well. You'll get a container, you'll fill it up with straw or hay, then you'll just add water enough to let it sit in there. You'll get hydrated lime. You can get it at Home Depot, Lowe's. It's just a bag of hydrated lime. And you'll add about half a cup to a cup in there. You'll check it with a pH strip. You just want it above 12. Anything 12 and above is perfect. It'll kill anything that's in there, and you'll let it soak for 12 hours. Once you let it soak, you can strain it. I usually put the straw in mesh bags. That way it makes it easy to pull out. And then you just hang it, dry it for another 12 hours. Once it's dry enough, you mix it with your spawn, which is your grain that's been consumed by mycelium. You mix it all together. You can put it in bags. You can put it in a bucket with holes. You can put it in laundry basket and then just put it somewhere in the shade, or if you have a grow room inside with proper humidity, and eventually you'll get mushrooms to pop out. It's a real simple one that you can do at home. It's really user-friendly. You're not dealing with so much of a contamination issue. The lime really helps a lot with that. As long as you have good spawn, you should be pretty solid by doing that. All right, sterilization. Sterilization completely kills everything. So the bags, the oak, a lot of that wood comes with pathogens, comes with bacteria, comes with things that we don't want our mycelium to be infected by. So we will put these bags in the sterilizer. And if you're doing bags, you want to make sure you lift the bags above the water, so you can use electric boxes, you can use pie dishes, just something to lift that bag off the water. If they're touching water, they can seal as well. And then whenever you put them in, make sure you have something on top of the bags, whether it be the aluminum plate that comes with the pressure cooker or just another pie dish. You just want something on top of that bag. And the reason for that is whenever those bags come to pressure, they start expanding. So if they expand and clog or block these holes, you just now made a bomb. So you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure those bags have something on top to keep from pushing into these holes. And as long as you have that, you should be fine. So just safety first, please. For the jars, you don't need to. The jars you will just put in there. Like you saw, it had a little bit of aluminum foil on top, and that's just, sometimes the jars tend to open a little bit. So if you have the aluminum on top, it helps whenever you take them out, you can reseal them without feeling like you potentially contaminated something. So that just helps with that. And if you ever pressure cook the jars, add a little vinegar to the water. The vinegar will keep the jars from being cloudy and muggy, and it'll make it a lot easier to keep them clean. The jars with grain you cook for 45 minutes at 15 PSI. The bags will cook for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on what you're comfortable with. I usually cook it for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Some people will go as far as 4 or 6. It just depends on what you're comfortable with. And obviously how much time you're willing to spend on it. So still air boxes and flow hoods. A still air box is essentially a plastic container that you drill 2 holes in. You'll clean it on the inside, you'll prep all your work, and it's essentially just still air in that box. So whenever you put your hands in there with your gloves, you're working within still air. This helps keep certain bacteria from when you're opening your mouth or talking, or just airflow from your room coming in and messing with your work. A lot of this is really useful when you're doing like agar dishes or you're working with genetics on a certain level. Their other method is, there are these things called flow hoods, which they use in science labs. They're big, clean spaces where a certain speed of air comes through and gives you clean air. Those things are really expensive and they cost a lot of money. I came across a forum a couple years back that came up with this great idea that has worked for me tremendously, which is just getting a box fan and then going to Home Depot and getting the highest grade filters I can get, which I think are like a 10, and then just duct taping them to the box fan. That will give you just enough clean air to work with either petri dishes, liquid cultures, genetics. If you're interested in that, it's a great tool to use. I've been able to take that to trips and do tissue samplings from mushrooms that I found in Tennessee or other states. If I'm ever just trying to go somewhere and do genetic work, I can just put it in a plastic bag, keep it covered so there's no dust that gets into it while it's not being used, and then just take it with me in the car, travel, do whatever I have to do, and then bring it back. It works out really well, and it's super cheap and a lot more affordable than a flow hood. So sterile procedures. Sterile procedures are very important. Whenever you're working with mushrooms, you're working with clean plates, clean syringes, and there are pathogens everywhere. So usually you definitely want to clean your space. You want to use gloves. You want to use masks, because if you're talking, if you're doing anything, you have a little bit of spit coming out, you have things floating around everywhere, so you're just trying to keep that to a minimum. The more you keep your things clean, the more you're wiping in between procedures, it just helps keep contamination completely down. I usually like to clean my areas. I like to even clean the rooms beforehand. Showering before is a big one, just keeping yourself clean. If you've been outside, you've been to the nursery, you might come back with something like a shirt, some kind of pathogen, shoes, shorts, like it comes in so many different ways. So, yes.
So it seems like there's a lot of work necessary to make sure you're cleaning everything else, but out in, like on the logs outside of my yard, they're growing and there's not any kind of prep.
Yeah, so with the logs, you usually would use something like plugs. So if you're gonna make your plug, you might be using sterile techniques to make the plugs. Once you make the plugs and put them into the wood, at that point, sterilization is really not even a factor, because now you're introducing them into actual logs.
They're grown naturally by themselves anyway, so.
Yeah. But the plugs, stuff like this, like if you're doing plugs, if you're doing agar dishes, if you're, even if you're working with inoculating like your bags, you definitely just want to wipe your bag, like your hands, you want to wipe the table down, just keeping it as clean as possible. You can definitely get away with a few things, but keeping those things in check just really helps a lot. Do you have a perspective?
If something does get contaminated, what does it do? Does it ruin the mushrooms from growing, or what happens if it gets contaminated?
So if it gets contaminated, then essentially you don't really want to consume it. There are certain molds like trichoderma that might not really affect you like that, but there's things like black mold that would harm you. So if you ever see contamination, my recommendation is just throw it out and start over. If you have tubs and you see a bunch of mold, put masks on, put gloves on, and just work with them. Certain molds will be okay if you breathe them in. I wouldn't recommend breathing any molds in, but there are certain molds that if you breathe in will really hurt you. So if you're ever working with molds or contamination, just put gloves on, just stay safe. Better safe than sorry,
So you would see the contamination, you would see the mold.
Yeah. Usually they're pretty distinctive. The one that's a little harder to see is cobweb mold because it's very fluffy and white, kind of like mycelium will be. So that one's a little harder to catch. But others like trichoderma or orange bread molds are very easy to see. Because it turns very green. There's orange ones, and then there's like fluffy white ones, but has like little black speckles on it, so you can kind of tell that it's not meant to be there. So back to the steps of cultivation, right? We got grain preparation, sterilization, grain inoculation and colonization, substrate preparation and sterilization / pasteurization, substrate inoculation and colonization, fruiting and harvesting. If you start this whole process from beginning to end, you're looking at 2.5 to 3 months of work, right? And it's not consistent work, it's just pockets of work and then a lot of patience. So it's just, you're gonna spend a lot of time waiting. If you wanna grow mushrooms, one of the biggest things is patience, because you'll spend one day working all day and then you have to wait 3 weeks to wait for the next step. So during colonization, whenever they're colonizing grain or blocks, they might take 2 to 4 weeks. Some varieties might take up to 6 to 9 weeks. Things like shiitake would take quite some time before they decide they want to fruit. Oysters are always a good one. I've had some that wanted to fruit within a week of me inoculating them, but usually no more than like 2 to 3 weeks. So they're very aggressive growers. All right. So grain preparation. So once you've chosen your grain and you want to prep your grain, you're ready to do it, there's a couple different methods. Like there's the soak, where you just let it sit and soak a certain amount of grain overnight for 12 hours. Strain it, put it in your jars, pressure cook them, you're good to go, right? Simmering, a little bit quicker, you just put them in a pot of water, boil them for about 30-40 minutes, strain them, let them dry for 2-3 hours, put them in the jar, cook them, right? Quickest way I like to do it is just no soak, no simmer. Just put a certain amount of grain, certain amount of water, cover it, put it in the pressure cooker, and once it's done releasing pressure, after it's done cooking, you turn it off, it releases pressure, you carefully take them out, shake them, and then you're set. And that will just take 2-3 hours, well 3 to 4 maybe, and instead of just the whole night, having to do that the next morning, you're kind of taking more time of the day. So whatever you're willing to do, I mean, this is all a preference thing. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. It's just whatever works best for you. So grain inoculation, that's super simple. Once you have a grain jar that's completely sterilized, cooled down, you want to let these cool about a day or two. You don't want it to be warm. If it's too warm and you put your spores or your culture in here, it's going to kill it and just ruin whatever you just did. So usually I let them cool for about 2 days. You'll clean the top of the injection port. So these lids I've made with a syringe filter and a self-injection port. Before, you would have to slowly open this jar lid and really quickly put a little bit in there and then close back up. When you open these lids, you're allowing air to come in, bacteria, pathogens, to then contaminate it. These lids are very simple to make. They're really cool. This is just a self-injection port you can get on Amazon and same with the syringe filters. If you don't want to get these, you can make them really easy with the metal lids that they already come with. Just drill 2 small holes, get high heat resistant silicone at Walmart, and then just put a little bit of silicone on one hole and at the bottom. And then the other, you can get some stuffing from Walmart in the yarn section. It's called parafilm. And you just put a little bit in there and stuff it through the side, and that's your filter. So those are great if you're first starting off and you don't want to spend a lot of money. You can wash those. You just have to dry them immediately. If you let them sit there, the aluminum rids will rust and it just becomes a problem. These are a lot reusable. These are dishwasher safe. It makes my life a lot easier to do it this way. But the self-injection point is a big one. As you stick the needle in, so you'll first clean this with alcohol, let it dry. If you're using a fresh needle, good. If not, you can flame sterilize. Get a lighter, split it up to it, get the tip red hot, and then let it sit for 2 seconds. Stick the needle in. All you need is 1 cc or 1 milliliter of this to colonize a whole jar. You can put the whole thing in there if you want. It might help colonize it a little quicker, but 1 to 2 cc's will be more than enough to colonize this jar. And then you let it sit somewhere dark and cool for 2 to 3, maybe even 4 weeks. Then you'll start getting a jar that starts getting mycelial growth, starts slowly consuming through that jar, eating the sugar and the carbs that the grain offers, basically creating a huge mass for you to use in bags. or whatever straw, wherever you want to use it.
Some question, does it need air though?
So that's what the little air filter's for, so this
Yeah,
gives a little bit of
okay,
gas
just a little
exchange.
bit,
It needs a little, not a whole lot. When you think about mycelium growing in ground,
Yeah.
it grows in between a lot of leaf litter, so there's a lot of CO2 buildup there, which kind of helps with mycelial growth. Once they start producing fruit forms, they're actually looking for air, which then they'll pop out. And once they reach enough air, it's when they feel like, okay, this is a great time for me to start releasing my seed or my spore, and that's when they start going through that process. Substrate prep, which I kind of went over a little bit. Prepping your substrate is just taking your oak, hardwood, your soil, putting it to hydrate, and then just folding it, put it in here. Remember, put the glass lid or just something on top so it doesn't create a bomb in there for you. Let it cook. These, I usually just let them, once they're done cooking, I'll let them sit and cool overnight in this. They'll create a vacuum, completely sealing that bag. And then that bag is good to be sterile for a little while. So if you can't get to it within a few days, I mean, I've had bags sit with me for at least 2-3 months before I use them, and they've been perfectly fine. So we get into substrate inoculation with these bags. Once you get a bag, you'll open it up. You'll first wipe it down with alcohol. You'll open it up. You'll get your spawn. You'll open this jar, and you'll add maybe 1/4 of a cup of this into this jar. And then you'll seal it up with either tape or a heat sealer, usually. But you can use tape, anything just to kind of close the bag on top. Shake it up a little bit, and then you sit and wait again. For another 4 weeks, you'll sit there and wait for this bag to fully colonize, and you'll see the white mycelium just overtake it. Once it overtakes it, you can then clip one of the edges, release the air that's inside, fold it back kind of like you see here, and then you'll have obviously a white mass, and then you can make your incision. Obviously you'll clean first, you'll make your incision, and then you'll spray with distilled water. Do not use tap. It will immediately contaminate everything. Tap has chlorine as well as other bacteria from the piping that will contaminate with the fungus that we have here. And since our fungus in here is in clean conditions, it has never been in contact with pathogens or anything else. So when it does, it freaks out. Some will be able to beat it out, but for the most part, it just won't help. So always use distilled water. Let me see what else. Do this one last thing, and I think I'll be done. So understanding contamination. You have a few contaminants that you run into, which we'll just switch over to pictures. So you have trichoderma, which is this very green mold. It starts off white, which can be really misleading at times, but then it turns green and it goes fast. It'll take over really quick. You have orange bread mold that will pop up. So if you see orange, another bacteria, another pathogen, just go ahead and toss it. Bacillus is sour rot. This one's a little harder, but if you open up your grain jar with your mycelium and it smells sour, they're kind of fermenty, that's bacillus. You want to go ahead and throw that out. When you open these jars or any bag with mycelium, it's going to smell like fresh fungus, and you'll know that smell, and you'll kind of be able to see that it's clean, and that's kind of what you want. If you smell bacillus, I'll just go ahead and throw it out and start over. Cobweb mold, really fluffy, really light, hard to compare with some fluffy mycelium, so it's hard to see sometimes. But once it starts taking over, you kind of get an idea. And then pinhead mold, similar to cobweb, but you'll see these tiny dots on the top, these little pinheads, and that's kind of how you can tell that you have another contamination in your bag or your jars. So these are some of the main contaminants that you'll come across when it comes to cultivation. And then fruiting, these bags are really simple to fruit. Just keep them next to a window for light. Mushrooms don't need a lot of light, but they need it for pigmentation and direction. So just keep a little bit of light to them. And then whenever you make that incision, spray them consistently. If you start seeing browning, it's just drying up on that side, so just spray a little bit more on that end. If you see wet spots, you might be spraying a little bit too much, so just hold back on the spraying. But for the most part, oysters and linemen are great to grow indoors next to a window. They're great to eat, great edible, great medicinal mushrooms. So those two I would definitely recommend trying. Reishi is good. These grow inside bags. This one's one that's just old, so it's kind of dried up. But those are actually really medicinal too, great for immunity support. And these you can just grow in the bag. They'll just grow the antler formations in the bag. And once they reach to the top, you can just cut it, harvest them, dry them, and use them for tea, extractions like tinctures. They were great. I usually use it for the winter holidays, whenever I need that immunity boost kind of help. And then harvesting, be careful. You can always just pull these out. You can just pull them and rip them off, or you can use a sharp knife. Just grab them from the base and slowly cut. If you're using a sharp knife, be careful. You might run into a soft spot in the mycelium or the fruit body that you might just go a little bit too quick and just cut yourself a little bit. I've done that a few times, so just be careful. Ripping them, sometimes it can be a little hard, but for the most part, they tend to be just kind of pull it back and yeah.
So once you pull off the fruit from that like this, will it grow back in the same spots? Is this what the original cut was, or do you go make another cut?
It usually will grow in the same spot. Depending, sometimes, like right now, there's a little space in this bag. So if I pull it from here, it might want to decide that there's more humidity right here, and it wants a fruit right here. So if you do that, see that? Make a decision, open that up, and then just strain that area and let it fruit back out. You can always take back the other decision you made or keep spraying that, but they're pretty resilient. Once you see growth in a certain position, just go from that instead of trying to make it green.
So when you have a bag like that, do you really have to worry about contamination at this point? Like, has it already done pretty good, so you're set, like?
Not really. Once you get your first flush, once you open that bag and you start getting a good first flush without contamination, now they've been open to other things in the air, so they kind of start building a little bit of immunity. So you can have them through 2 to 3, even 4 times up until you start seeing trichoderma or something else take over. So you can keep spraying and keep getting fruit. Usually a 10-pound block will give you anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds of mushroom. Yes.
Can you use humidifiers or grow lights with them?
Oh yeah, 1,000%. Yeah. Usually if you're doing it in a tent, you would have to have some kind of humidity system in there, which are very easy to make. And then some type of lighting. It doesn't have to be strong lights, it could just be some kind of light to kind of just give them direction.
So humidifier, and what was the other one?
Grow lights.
Grow lights, yeah. If you're using a tent, just some kind of humidity system. They just need some to be in that 85 to 90 degree humidity rate. Yeah, you should be able to do that. All right. How much time do we have left?
2.5 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So the last thing I'll talk about, liquid culture. This is going a little bit beyond, but this here is a liquid culture. So this is a liquid nutrient broth that you can grow mycelium in. If you ever buy a syringe, it comes with 10 cc's. You already have this lid and you have the jar. All you need is water and light malt extract. You can also use honey. You can use some kind of sugar, molasses. But essentially you would put a certain, for this it's 600 milliliters of water to a gram of light malt extract. Then I just put it in there, I pressure cook it 45 minutes at 50 psi just like a grain. And once it's cool, you can take 1 squirt of your syringe and make 60 more.
Wow.
So you can multiply your genetics by making a liquid culture, which then you can keep your genetics for a longer time. You can use a lot more to try different things out. So if you'd like, you can always look up liquid cultures and see how they're done. But they're very simple. It's just water, light malt extract, or honey. Put it in a pressure cooker, cook it for 45 minutes, 50 psi, let it cool. And once it's cool, just obviously clean your area, have a clean syringe, put 1 cc, or you can put the whole thing in there. Wait about a week and you'll start seeing a glob like this kind of form. And it's just mycelium suspended in liquid, essentially. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So not that I don't like science,
No.
but I'm probably not getting into all the
No,
genetics and
yeah.
stuff. But when you do it, how are you testing it out? Now, I just know when I was a kid, it was like, be careful what mushrooms you eat.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? Are you like consuming them to see like how they are? Like,
So usually when you're growing gourmet mushrooms, they're all for edibility purposes. So things like lion's mane have a lot of medicinal factors on top of that, like help for cognitive function,
Once you start blending and doing like genetic stuff, looking at, like if you're trying to come up with a new.
Gotcha, like if you're trying to blend things, yeah, at that point you're kind
Who's
of like.
testing these, like, do you do it or?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just wondering.
usually the person working with the genetics and manipulating those genetics are either eating or taking those genetics to see what the outcome is, right? So flavor wise, it could be smell wise, it could be texture wise. So you could be looking for a mushroom that's meatier. So whenever you grow them, you might see one that's just a little bigger, a little denser that like you like. So you might take a sample of that one and continue to grow that to try to isolate that characteristic, right?
He's talking about poison.
Well, what he was saying too, but,
Because
like I said,
usually,
I just
if you're
haven't
gonna,
ventured much into
yeah, because if you're gonna cultivate, most people are gonna cultivate edibles. Rarely is someone cultivating a toxic mushroom.
And when you say edible, you just say consumable stuff, not like get high stuff.
No, consumable stuff. So like stuff that goes to restaurants. So like shiitakes, maitakes, oysters, even morels at this point I think are cultivated. So just those edible like gourmet mushrooms that you would get at the store that might cost you $20 a pound, that you can spend a little bit of time and get that on your own, and get the medicinal factors, but also get the freshness of it, you know.
And if you're doing it home with the grow tent or whatever, you can do it year round.
Yeah, and you don't even need the grow tent, like orchards and wines, man. Next to the window, bottle of distilled water, and that's all you need to get is fruit. Cool. I'll take one more and then I think I'm good.
So, we talked about the gourmet mushrooms, mushrooms, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, why do I have mushrooms growing in my yard?
Because they're decomposers, so they're either working with the grass roots or tree roots. So they work with plants. They help distribute nutrients with plants and trees, but they also break down organic matter within the soil. So if there's wood pieces, chips within the ground, they're in there breaking things down. They're also just breaking all organic matter down. So they'll usually pop up after rains. But if you ever see a mushroom around, don't worry about it. It's not going to cause you any harm. You can touch any mushroom. It's not going to kill you. Just don't go eating every mushroom that you see. Just make sure you're good. But for the most part, they're great for your garden. They're great for your yard. That means there's a lot of beneficial bacteria, microbes, and mycorrhizal fungi in there that are helping with the composition of your soil. So it's a very good thing if you see mushrooms around. Cool. All right, I think my time is done.